You've probably had that experience where your partner or sibling or colleague makes one little comment or just forgets a small thing you asked them, and you have a huge, disproportionate, out of control emotional reaction. And while you might be sort of in the right about that thing they said, maybe it was a little bit snide, or maybe that person should have remembered to do that thing. They promised to do something and they didn't. But your reaction is so over the top that it makes it very hard to avoid a real rupture in that relationship. It makes it really hard to actually deal with it in an adult and a mature manner, because you might rage out at them or something that then is almost far worse than the little overstepping of the line that they may have perpetrated. And so it also really teaches us a lot about how emotions work, because it seems really confusing. Everyone's very confused, like, oh man, she got so angry at me the other day. I just did this little thing and she just completely blew up. Or similarly at work, you might have said, oh, I just sent her this email saying that she has to do that work again, and now she's not talking to me. Or whatever it is. It's really hard to navigate these human situations, but there's very good reasons for why we overreact. And I wanted to explore that in this video so we can understand what the hell's going on and navigate it more in a, more frictionless way. The key thing to remember is that your emotions, your emotional reactions in the present moment are never about what it seems to be about. It's always a historical emotional wound that we have been carrying. So say, for example, when you were young, maybe you were one of many children, and you never really felt listened to. You were the youngest, and your needs kind of got trampled on, and you never got listened to, and it felt like your needs and emotions didn't really matter. And as a child, that would have created a lot of painful emotions that you wouldn't have been able to handle, that would have been quite overwhelming, and you wouldn't have had anyone to listen or support you in that. So maybe there's a sense of helplessness and hurt and abandonment and anger, and all these emotions are held in your body. You had to push them down and store them in your body, where they're kind of looping in your unconscious, and they get triggered up again by similar situations. So later on in life, every time someone doesn't listen to you, those same wounds would have been triggered and come to the surface. And it feels like it's about that thing in the moment, but actually it's about that. It's an echo of that original wound from your childhood. So say your colleague, doesn't listen to you, around the meeting table. You've got good ideas and they you feel like you're not heard by them. You can have a really strong emotional reaction, because it's not about that moment and that colleague. It's about the entire historical weight of just never having been heard again and again and again and again throughout your childhood and throughout your adult life even. And these emotions are cumulative. So, the first time there would have been a certain amount of pain that you'd have experienced. But then as it repeats itself, as this trauma loops, each time it comes up, you're conditioned to push it back down again, because you're never really taught how to meet these painful emotions. You push it back down again. Each time it comes up stronger, it gets pushed back down again. And so we end up in these loops. And this is why your emotional reactions actually can grow in intensity over time, particularly around certain core wounds that you might have. So it gets to the point that, by the time you're around that meeting table and your colleague sort of, just dismisses your ideas and waves you away without really looking at you, all that rage from your entire life suddenly explodes out into the room. And this is why it's disproportionate, because your nervous system is trying to protect you from all those times you haven't been heard. It's like the accumulated anger from every single time is suddenly coming up to the surface. It's not just about that one event. It's like the 100 events before that. They're all coming out at the same time. And so this is where this sort of emotional overreaction tends to come from. So it's this sense that it's never about that one event. It's your emotions have accumulated through time. And to really understand this, you have to understand how foundational connection is to us, to our survival. When it comes to being heard or being seen, it's what we're always looking for is these core values of safety, approval, control, being heard, being seen, being loved. And so tiny little manifestations of absences of those can feel really unsafe to our nervous system. So, someone might do something very small. They might forget to take the rubbish out when we ask them to. But what that means, or what that translates into for our nervous system, is they don't care. They're not listening. They're not meeting my needs. I don't have any control in the situation. They're not responding to me, to my attempts to communicate my needs. That means I'm really unsafe. This small thing's happened now, but it could be something much worse next time. You can sense this fundamental sense of not being, heard, seen, valued, loved, not being safe in some way. And even if it's a tiny little thing, it signifies something much bigger and more important to your nervous system. That's also why, these little comments here and there, people try and deny them. Oh, I was just joking, oh, it was just a little thing. Why are you getting so head up about it? Sometimes it's reasonable, because that little comment, that little bit of sarcasm, although it's small, carries a huge amount of weight for your nervous system, because your nervous system is so primed to stay in connection, to stay safe, that's like the warning light on the dashboard, or even worse, really, that more is to come, that you're fundamentally, they're not listening to you. Right now is that one little comment, but there's a whole lot hidden behind that. So when you combine all of these things together, you get this sense that, when someone makes a snide comment, for example, that not only does that signify a deeper unsafety, it's not just about what they said on the surface, but it triggers your history of unsafety and not being seen or heard. Then this is just an example. That you carry in your body, and all of that then comes out at once to defend you and protect you. And that's why you overreact. Or overreaction, that makes it sound like it's bad or wrong. It's automatic, you're not doing anything wrong. You can't help it. It's an automatic response from your nervous system. So what do we do about this? The only way is to start to process through those layers of historical emotion, those undigested emotions from all these experiences you've had, all that anger and the sadness that you carry from those moments, for example, of not being heard, have to slowly be met, because the only reason they're accumulating is because they were never met. We were never able to feel them and process them through. We were never given the support to be present with them. And we need to go back in time almost to these pockets within ourselves where we're carrying these emotions and cry those tears, feel that anger. That's the core of it. And as we do that, we're emptying ourselves out of this old emotional residue, and then we become much, much less reactive, and our reactions become much more attuned to what's going on. We can also see more clearly. We can kind of discern what's reasonable, unreasonable, what's acceptable, unacceptable. If we're carrying so much rage within us that when someone says the tiniest thing, we explode, it's quite hard for us to discern, am I ever, is that, my trauma just acting out? Or was it them, they're actually being unreasonable? It's very hard to discern the truth from the trauma. So as you start to work through your trauma, it becomes more and more, you become more and more able to discern what's actually true. You can watch my other videos, especially how to feel your feelings is a good starting point for much more details on how to actually work through these layers of emotional residue. Hope that helps. See you later.